you cried, you're counting down the days. Your mothers and brothers have all flown away.
Good evening and welcome to Tuesday Folk People. My name is Maddie Leedham, and for our second Tuesday Folk People session of the year, I am delighted to introduce you to a young singer-songwriter who has been making waves on the UK folk scene. A finalist of the New Roots Folk Competition, this artist frequented the 2019 UK Festival and Folk Club scene, which included a performance at Cambridge Folk Festival, before having to adapt her methods, as many artists had to, during the pandemic of 2020 to perform online to her audience. She's now back out and about, performing all over the folk scene, including a recent tour of East Anglia. She's been described by BBC Radio Cambridgeshire as having a truly passionate and important voice. This voice has shared over 7 releases, including her recent project, 7, which has been described by Celtic Music Radio as a dazzling combination of voice and songwriting talent that rarely appears. Mentored by the English Folk Expo in 2021, this artist has supported the likes of Lady Masery, Gilmore and Roberts, and former Tuesday Folk People guest Bob Fox. I was very lucky to see this artist perform live at Manchester Folk Festival last year, and I'm delighted to give you all the opportunity to see her as well. So, without further ado, let's welcome the wonderfully talented Lizzy Hardingham to our online studio. Hello, Lizzy. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Where are you currently? A very fairy-lighty place.
I'm currently in my kitchen, which is just in Hertfordshire, which is the southeast of England, and it's a lovely place. We nearly had some snow last night, sort of threatened it, and then didn't happen. It was very disappointing.
Well, the hope was there. That's more than I've had. It's just rain here, so, sounds good to me. Anyway, I've already given you a little introduction. And so now all that is left for our audience to truly kind of understand what they're getting into this interview is to hear your music. And we've got our first song, which is I Could Have Loved You. Can you tell us about this before we hear it?
I certainly can. So I wrote this almost sort of by accident. I bought my sister bought my mum a Shruti box, which is a wonderful Indian drone instrument that they're getting quite big now. I think quite a lot of musicians have them, certainly on the folk circuit. And it plays this wonderful sort of melancholy, rousing, really interesting drone sound. And I was playing it at her house, and then I sort of started writing this song, and I thought, oh, damn, I've written a song on one now. Now I'm going to have to buy one for myself. But it's all about a relationship I rather foolishly attempted during the lockdown in 2020. And spoiler alert, it didn't end well. But that cliche of not dating a songwriter is so true, because you will end up in a song. And this is one such song that's a bit bitter, a bit melancholy, and it's called I Could Have Loved You.
I could have loved you if truth be told. I could have fallen madly in love, and I would have waited the icy cold. You suffered gladly. The sun turns to spectre, the sky turns to ember, and I cannot save you. I could have loved you if given the chance. We could have been something rare to find. I could have shown you the steps to dance if you'd have only dared. The sky turns to lightning, the darkness inviting, and I cannot save you. I was a salmon swimming upstream, and you took me from the river. The hook turns to baiting, the fisherman's waiting, and I cannot save you. I cannot wave the wand and lessen the length that you hold me away, and I cannot save a sullen young soul too guarded to enter the fray. No, I cannot save you. No, I cannot save you.
What a great song. I have to say, you saying it's like bitter and everything, but I'd like a song written about me no matter what. I love that. And I felt very Joni Mitchell-esque, I thought. And
Thank
as a
you.
Joni Mitchell fan, I loved
Mhm.
it. Just I think it was the jumps and the leaps in your voice.
Yeah, she does
Amazing.
have quite sort of vocal acrobatics, and she uses that head voice really nicely. That
Yeah.
I think quite a lot of people either use all head voice or sort of not very much, and it's nice to mix between the two, really.
Well, you seem to have got that down, got that nailed. And I have to say, if that is the price to get a Shruti box, is that song, it's definitely worth it.
Oh, bless you. Cheers.
Okay, so shall we now go on to kind of exploring how you got into folk? And yeah, so what was your first exposure to it, to the folk scene?
Well, I'd hasten to say I can't really remember my first exposure because I was so young. So we've, as a family, been going to folk festivals and folk concerts and folk clubs since I was really, really tiny. I mean, I'm pretty sure that my parents went to Fairport's Cooperative Convention, great festival for families, or certainly it definitely was then, even more so now. Just before I was born. So my mum was quite heavily pregnant, and we went every year of my childhood. So it was such a tradition of my being that every summer we'd go to at least Fairport's Cooperative Convention and some other folk festivals, that it never seemed like a sort of foreign entity of music. It was just part of the way we were as a family. And also, my mum she has quite a varied music taste, and it's very eclectic. She sings classically herself, but there was always folk music on in the house, whether it was Fairport Convention, Sandy Denny, Chris Weil and Julie Matthews, Joni Mitchell, all of these brilliant sort of stalwarts of singer-songwriter and folk tradition. It was absolutely wonderful. And then that sort of spiraled into traditional music and American music and Irish and Scottish music. And it all just snowballs, doesn't it? The older you get, the more you sort of find for yourself as well. So I definitely think it's a family thing for me. It was always there in the house. And I think that pays off. If you have music from a young age, you're going to love music for the rest of your life, really.
100%. It almost gets ingrained in you. Just you don't even necessarily ask for it, but it's just there because it's subliminal in the background non-stop.
Yep.
I mean, it's the best kind of subliminal messaging or whatever you can say.
Yeah, I would say so.
So then did that mean that from a young age you were performing on the folk scene, or did that not really happen till later?
Not really, no, you're right. It didn't happen till later that I was performing sort of folk and acoustic music. I spent a lot of my sort of childhood and early teens, late teens performing I did a lot of dance and I did a lot of musical theatre. So I would perform a song perhaps in a dance show, and they would almost certainly be musical theatre. So the first one I did was When Somebody Loved Me from Toy Story 2, which is an absolute cracker of a song.
Yes, it is.
I think I was about 6 or 7, and I sang the song to this big theatre with sort of 600 parents in it, and it was wonderful. And just from that moment, I just thought, yeah, I can get behind this. This is great. So a lot of my early life was sort of musical theatre and performing in bands and orchestras because I played violin from a young age. And then it wasn't until after university that I actually thought I started going back to the folk clubs, and they welcomed me with such open arms that I thought, oh, maybe actually this is the direction I want to go in. And I feel like I'm really, really grateful, certainly for my local folk clubs, for showing me that actually that was a viable option.
Mm. So it really was kind of subliminal a little bit, the fact that it was
Hmm.
music theatre, but then you've ended up in folk in the long run. You've like
Yeah.
gone back to the thing that you've known all your life. And you studied music at university, didn't you?
Mm, I did, yeah. I went to Liverpool University and I did a mixed degree in classical and popular music. So it was nice to get a sort of a variety of genre and a variety of practices, variety of sort of theoretical knowledge. So it stood me in really good stead to then go on and understand a bit more about what I was writing, what I was producing, but also understand what I was seeing. Because like I said, from a young age, I've gone to a lot of gigs, I've gone to a lot of concerts, performances, and it really certainly helped me, and I think sort of lifted the experiences of going to this live music, actually understanding sort of not just the actual music but socially the effect it's having, and sort of economically the effect it's having. And it's so interesting. But also I think the most important thing for me was just meeting so many other musicians, because people came from obviously around the country, as you do in any university setting. And it was meeting people who had a completely different musical background and had completely different musical skills, and having 3 years of meshing them all together was just completely
Mm.
invaluable.
Yeah, I have to say from my experience of doing it, it's the exact same as what you just said. It's that kind of you learn all different types of music, even like the sociological impacts and stuff,
Yeah.
and you just don't even think about that as just a performer, but it does kind of um, affect your performance then because you have a broader understanding. And I
Yeah.
kind of feel like, did it help you with? So you did classical, you did musical theatre, and now you're in folk. Do you think that this kind of understanding of more genres than just the one you're in helps as well?
Yeah, I think any musician that understands and listens to and possibly even performs as well a variety of genres, it just puts everything in context. So if we're doing folk, it's not that hasn't had influence from all these other genres and all these other musical practices. So it really helps to sort of encapsulate what you're doing with
Mm.
all this other wonderful music, and going, oh, actually, that's come from this other genre, that's come from this other practice, and see how it trickles down over time. And I think it just gives you a more, certainly as a performer, a more well-rounded understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it came to be.
Yeah.
Um, that I find just absolutely fascinating, and I mean, I'd love to study more. Hopefully, that'd be something I might be able to do later in life. But yeah, I'd love to study more about, certainly about folk music, but just music in general, because it's such a fascinating topic.
Yeah, it really is. And once you start, it's almost addictive. You just want to
Yeah,
learn more and more. And
yeah.
I mean, if you could learn without the stress of assignments, that would be best.
Oh,
But,
that'd be just
you
lovely,
know,
wouldn't it?
yeah, that's just not an option, sadly. Um, so you mentioned that your family listened to a lot of music growing up. Would you say that your style reflects very much the artists that they listened to then? Is there kind of parallels there?
Probably there are definitely things I wouldn't have been introduced to without my family's influence. But
Hmm.
then of course, when you sort of get to your early teens and you start listening to music that you found on your own, and you suddenly feel like, oh, I'm this independent musical entity, this is wonderful. You have that weird sort of enlightenment phase where you think any music you found, you're the only person who listens to it. Um, so I think definitely people like Chris Weil and Julie Matthews, who are, in my opinion, two of the finest songwriters in the world, and Fairport Convention, and all these wonderful sort of proper folk rock singer-songwriter people, um, have had massive influence on the way I perform and all the other music I listen to. But then more contemporary folk music like Blair Dunlop, Gilmore and Roberts, Laura Marling, that certainly my family hadn't heard at the time, that have also then carried me through a lot of my early life, and really influenced the way I write, the way I perform, the way I
Yeah.
listen. So sort of a bit of both, really. Nice family influences, but then also finding your own stuff and going, yeah, this is great. I can't believe I found this.
Yeah, you're so proud. The first time you find an artist that they've never heard of, you're like, I've got it. I'm in it. I'm there. So how come you chose folk and not musical theatre or classical?
Well, I did after university. The plan was to go into musical theatre. I was going to go and do a master's in musical theatre in London at a drama school, and then hopefully go into the whole world and enjoy all of that stress and drama that that has to offer. Um, Unfortunately, at the time, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and it suddenly became not so much of a viable option, because even
Yeah.
if you want to act and sing and be less on the movement side, your body has to be reliable, and mine just isn't, which is something I've come to terms with, and I'm actually almost quite grateful for, because had that not happened, I wouldn't have come back home, gone to the folk clubs to find solace, to find comfort, to find a community to help me get through it, and they wouldn't have been able to show me that that was actually what I wanted to do. So, in a weird way, not that I'm massively spiritual or religious, but in a weird way, I do think I'm actually quite grateful for the arthritis and for the opportunity it gave me to step back from what my plan was and think, is there another option that would actually be just as rewarding?
Hmm. So would you say that the folk clubs were quite influential then, or quite crucial in
Oh,
your life?
definitely. Certainly, there are a handful round me, so in Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire, that have absolutely championed not just young people and emerging talent, but I feel personally that they've championed me,
Mm.
which I think for any young person is so important, because you come into this, or certainly this is my experience. I came into a community full of, I hope nobody minds me saying, middle aged and retired people. And that can be quite daunting. You can feel quite sort of outside of the community, and I think it's quite easy to feel isolated. Um, but that wasn't my experience coming into the folk clubs that I chose to go to at that time. So Watford Folk Club, which is quite local to me,
Yeah.
and they have a songwriting competition, and they encourage me to enter, and they encourage me to go along to New Roots, which is another young person's music, folk music competition that then itself championed me in quite a big way. And also Royston Folk Club, that have a dedicated young folk musician or young artists competition, that I actually came runner up in, and they have given me so many gigs, so many opportunities. They've introduced me to people all across the country that would have taken me an awful lot longer had I been on my own without their support. So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely invaluable. These people and these clubs that I don't think they necessarily realize the impact they have on people, but yeah, really important.
Brilliant. And I think we're going to explore a little bit more about the competitions and sort of schemes that you've been part of to get to where you are today
Mm.
after we've heard our next song. And our next song is Old Number Seven. Can you tell us about this one before we hear it?
Of course. So this is a new one for me, and it's one of the newest songs I've written, and I wrote it just after we went to the. It's called Focus Wales. It's in Wrexham. It's in Wales, and it's a conference of music that has sort of panels in the morning, and then lots of mingling and networking in the afternoon, and then come the evening, there's lots of showcases, which are really really short sets of music
Yeah.
in front of lots and lots of bigwigs, producers, booking agents, labels, all of these wonderful people, and you have 20 minutes to, you know, do your best to sell yourself and go, this is exactly what I do, and this is why you should come and talk to me and work with me. And it's quite a stressful thing, so the emotions were really high, and we went as this year and last year's contingent from the English Folk Expo artist mentoring program. And one of those people was Katie Rose Bennett, who is an absolutely beautiful singer, writes these poignant, profound lyrics. And she was playing with her a cappella choir called the Frankly Beaches. And I was feeling quite emotionally overwhelmed and struggling to cry and sort of struggling to really feel it and let everything out. And then I watched her performance with this a cappella choir, and I just absolutely let rip. The tears were falling down with gay abandon. I was absolutely sobbing, and I felt, oh gosh, I must look absolutely stupid. Everybody's going to think I look like an idiot. And I looked beside me, and there were two fellas who are both quite, they're quite quite masculine, quite I mean, I know that's quite a negative way to say it, but they're
Yeah.
quite butch, and they were both crying as well. So I just felt so overwhelmed that I felt I needed to write a song about it, and this is it. It's called Old Number 7 because that's where she was playing.
Here in my hotel room, doing my utmost to cry and praying for tears to fall. But how could I have known then, burdened by best Western fatigue, that the sweetest release was in your call. And number 7 was just like heaven to me. Five lonely voices echoing our only kitchen tiles, alone on a hill far now. But when finally they gathered, they sang what we needed to hear. We didn't know somehow. And number 7 was just like heaven to me. Voices fall on timbered walls, and I hold on tight. The sermon swells, how could you tell? Tonight in number 7, oh, it was heaven to me.
I love that song so much, and I feel that I relate to it a little bit because I saw Katie Rose Bennett this September, or was it October? It was October at Manchester Folk Festival,
Of course.
and genuinely the emotions that she can evoke with not only her own voice but with the a cappella choir is just amazing. And I love the thing of like an artist writing a song about another artist. I just think,
Yeah, I did ask her permission before. When I was in the middle of writing it, I felt so overwhelmed by the fact that the emotions were coming back when I was writing it that I felt I needed to ask her permission before then putting it on social media or anything like that. And she was like, "Oh gosh, are you serious? Yes, please."
I feel like, yeah, if you were her having someone writing a
Yeah,
song about your singing, it's like, great, I've got it, I've made
yeah.
it.
All right then.
Yeah, amazing. But it's a beautiful song.
Thank you.
And I think, well, that's just one. We've got 2 more to come, and they are also beautiful. So we're in for a bit more of a treat today. But I want to explore now the competitions. So you actually, it was New Roots competition
Yeah,
that kind of spurred you on a bit. Could
yeah,
you
definitely.
explain about New Roots? Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I did it in 2018, and yeah, it was just after this diagnosis, just after a short spell of unemployment. So I really needed some bolstering,
Yeah.
and yeah, my folk club encouraged me to enter, and it's basically a competition for young folk musicians, and there does have to be some traditional element for you to enter, and I think it's from 16 to 21 possibly, or possibly it might be 24. Either way, it's quite young people, and because I live in Hertfordshire and the competition's based in St Albans, it's run by the wonderful Alison McFarlane, who has her finger in every single folk pie there is. Um, but it's run through St Albans, which is a town very local to me. I assumed it would be fairly local. Maybe people
Yeah.
might come from like Kent or Buckinghamshire or basically the southeast. And I got there and I was so surprised to hear that a Ceilidh band had travelled from Inverness, and I just thought, oh, that I've come about 3 minutes down the road. And I was sort of checking with other people where they'd come from, and there was a girl from Lancashire, there was a girl from Newcastle, and I just thought, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. I didn't realise this pocket of young people existed, and amazing that New Roots was able to bring them into one room. And the basic premise is you play your songs and in front of an audience of festival bookers, folk club organisers, promoters, and also for professional musicians or music professionals who are the judges. And the judges give you some feedback, and the people in the audience then decide afterwards whether they're going to come and chat to you about possibly booking you and giving you, the idea is that they give you a gig one tier above where you are now. And for me at the time, I was not really gigging. It was the very, very start. So for them to be giving me anything felt absolutely amazing. And I got booked for quite a few festivals in 2019 through it, and quite a few sort of support or feature slots at folk clubs at late 2018, early 2019. And that really is where it all started for me. And it gave me the
Mm.
confidence to go, oh, actually, maybe I should value what I'm doing because somebody else has.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. And I think it also put me in a room with some people I'm still friends with now, that there are young people in folk music, and they are passionate and they do want to carry on these traditions, and I didn't necessarily realize they were out there, so it was nice to be put in a room with them.
Definitely. And what were you assessed on?
So I believe it was use of traditional material. So you were encouraged to sort of bend it, because of course traditional material is supposed to be malleable, it's supposed to be sort of adaptable, because that's what keeps
Yeah.
it going. And then also performance and musical aptitude, I think it was is what it was called. So it's basically the whole package is what you're being assessed on. And then you get some wonderful positive feedback, which is always great for the soul, and of course some constructive feedback as well, which is equally just as valuable, because that's what you need, especially when you're just starting out, or when you're young, or when you're a bit naive. Certainly I was. It's really helpful for somebody to go, oh, have you thought of maybe doing it this way instead? And
Yeah.
you go, oh yeah, should have thought of that, thank you very much.
Yeah, it sounds great, and I think it is that community that you
Mm.
you gather from doing these things, because that opened up, like, you caught the competition bug then, didn't you? And you've done a lot of other competitions since then.
Yeah, so I,
Um,
I think I realised once I'd done that there was real merit in somebody giving you constructive feedback in such a structured setting. And I
mhm.
thought, oh, well, what have I got to lose? I'm just going to go and enter all the ones I can find. And at the time, I think that was the Watford Folk Song Competition, the Milkmaid Songwriter Competition, and then the Royston Young Artists, which
Yeah,
which all ended fairly well for me. So that was quite nice. And all three of those clubs have been absolutely wonderful to me ever since. So I think it never hurts to just enter a competition, because the worst you're going
yeah.
to get is some nice feedback.
So each competition, did that give you performance opportunities? Did it open up doors to more?
Yeah,
So
definitely. So Watford already knew of me, and I'd been going quite regularly to their sing arounds, but they offered me a headline slot off the back of the songwriter competition. The same with the Milkmaid. I've actually just had that this year, obviously because of postponing and the lockdowns and
yeah,
all of that. I've had that this year, and it was really lovely to go back and have that headline performance. And then Royston. like I said earlier, have really just given me an absolute ton of gigs, whether it be feature or support, or then sort of outsourcing. They got me on at Cambridge Folk Festival in the club tent,
Wow.
and it was just absolutely wonderful when they sort of emailed and said, "Oh, we've got some ideas for you, Lizzy. We've put your name in here, here, and here," and they've all said yes. And I just think that's amazing that you've done that for me, and I'm so glad I entered your competition.
Yeah, definitely. And so would you recommend it to other young artists trying to pave their way in folk?
Definitely, because even if it's not your day, even if it's not your competition, you will find people in that audience and in that club, or whatever the venue is, who value your music. And I think when you're starting out, that is what you need, somebody to
Yeah,
reinforce that what you're doing is the right thing. And also, at all of these competitions, there will be more young people, more people who are passionate about music, and just meeting them and sort of getting that like-mindedness in the same room
yeah.
spurs people on, or certainly me. It just spurs me on. And yeah, enter all the competitions you can, because you've got nothing to lose. It's wonderful.
And have I got this right that you did your own songwriting competition? You hosted one?
I did indeed. So the aforementioned Alison McFarlane, who runs the St Albans Folk Festival,
Yeah,
she decided, it was 2019, that because it was an anniversary of some Roman heritage in the local area, we would run a folk competition. And she asked me if I would run it, and I thought, yeah, that sounds amazing. That's wonderful. So the theme was Romans, and you had to write a song on a Roman theme. And I was surprised again at how sort of far-fetched the entries were. And actually, I found a couple of musicians through that I don't think I would have found otherwise, and they're absolutely wonderful, and they're on all my
yeah.
playlists now. But yeah, being on the other side of it was really quite stressful, just sort of marking them before. And judging songs is, I didn't really judge. I was more of I judged when the songs were sent in by email, and then the judges that we outsourced came on the day. So we had some wonderful musicians come and judge. I was absolutely amazed that Phil Beer said yes to judging my little song competition, which was quite nice. And then we had some local musicians, so Jess Distill, who is in Said the Maiden, and we had Alison Raymond, who's a brilliant local musician, and also Chris Fox, who you've had on very recently.
Yes.
And that it was just amazing to go into their little huddle when they were sort of going through the songs and trying to judge which one was winning. It was so amazing to hear what they were saying and be part of that process. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was great fun to see it from the other side.
I think your competition bug went so extreme that you couldn't
Yeah.
just be in them anymore. You had to run them. So
I
is
would
that
agree.
what young people should expect? It doesn't stop at just getting the feedback. Soon you're going to be the one giving it to them
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah. That's the natural progression. Just do them, run them, be them.
Yeah. You are the face of folk competitions, Lizzy. Um,
I'll take that.
so, English Folk Expo now. I want to talk a bit about this before we have your next song. And you were part of the English Folk Expo Artist Mentoring Program.
Yeah.
And for any of our audience who are as clueless as I was until I met you, what is this program? What does it do?
Well, again, it's sort of a thing that you have to apply for and you have to enter, and then they whittle it down, and they usually choose 4 or 5 emerging artists. They don't necessarily have to be young people, just emerging folk
Yeah.
musicians. And the aim of the scheme is you get a year's worth of mentoring, and that is both through, you get a specific mentor that is just for you, that you can choose the relationship you're going to have. I had Michael Hughes from the Young Uns, who is an amazing singer, amazing sort of just amazing all-round good egg,
Yeah.
and of course knows everybody there is to know. And you then, obviously, usually in non-COVID times, you'd meet them in person, you'd go through what you're doing, you'd sort of discuss things and ask for advice, which is it's such a great resource to have. And I found, because we were doing it on Zoom and FaceTime, actually probably we did it more than we would have done if we were doing it in person, because he lives up in the northeast and I live down in the southeast, so I don't know when we would have met up. um, But yeah, and then as well as that, alongside that, you have sort of training days that again were supposed to be in person, but they were quite good on Zoom because it just meant you didn't have to put trousers on, which is quite nice.
Always nice.
So we had a couple of training days, one on sort of performance practice and with Nancy Kerr, and then we had one on business with Joe Townsend, and then we also had a couple of festival bookings. So we were supposed to be playing at Cambridge Folk Festival and a few other places. We went to some conferences, like I said earlier, Focus Wales and the English Folk Expo, which included Manchester Folk Festival, which was absolutely wonderful, and the Americana UK conference as well. That's early in the year. So all in all, it's focused at giving emerging artists more opportunities, more knowledge, and more sort of focused understanding of what they're doing and where they're trying to go with it.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing because I was on the program with three other musicians, Catherine Priddy, Danny Addison, and Dominique Hooper, all three of whom are absolutely wonderful musicians, but also they've got proper business hats on as well. Then they're taking it really seriously, and they know what they want, and they know which steps they need to do to get there. And it was inspiring, I think, for all four of us. The most valuable bit of the whole year, apart from Tom Besford, who is just an inspiring man, was the fact that we got to meet the other three participants, because it was just finding a community. And we still have a group chat now that we automatically go to. If you have a stupid question that you feel you can't ask, you just go, oh guys, does anybody know about this? And immediately you'll get three people come back and go, oh yeah, I'm not sure either. Or, oh yeah, I heard it's probably about this, and it's probably this.
Yeah.
And it's just such an untapped resource, having a proper community of people that you feel comfortable asking anything. So
100%. I mean, the music business can be really grueling, and to go at it alone can be very disheartening. So to have those three people and Tom Besford and everyone else who helped
yeah,
you with the Folk Expo mentoring program, it's just a really great thing to have and feel supported, and to
yeah,
know that on your down days there is someone there who can help you out. And
yeah,
that's brilliant. Okay, should we now go for your third song?
yeah.
Which is one of my favorites, and this is Harvester of Gold. What is this song about?
So I wrote this a good few years ago, but I think anyone who's seen me live will have heard me play it, because I'm not bored of it, and I hope I never will be. But it's called Harvester of Gold, and it's all about bees, or lack thereof. So
Yeah.
I wrote it on a sort of, I think it was an early spring, so it was probably March or so. It was still quite cold. There was a bit of a snap in the air, and I was walking home from work on that day, and I saw this bumblebee just gaily buzzing about, minding its own business. And I thought, oh, it's a bit cold. It's not really the season for that. Bit odd. And quite quickly, I went from that strange little thought to quite a sombering thought of, quite soon it might not be the season for bees at all. And luckily, there is quite a lot in the media and in sort of social awareness about bees and how important they are for our ecosystem and keeping everything alive, basically, with their little hairy, sticky legs, taking all the good stuff from one place to the next. Yeah, so I sort of opened the door, having had this thought about all the bees dying soon, and I picked up the guitar, and this song just came out fully formed. It is one of those songs that I don't massively feel like I wrote it, and then I sort of went round the internet for the next 3 or 4 days trying to look for possibly where I'd nicked it from.
Yeah, I see.
And
Yeah.
it's been 2-3 years and I haven't found where I've nicked it from, so I think I must have written it. But yeah, so it's quite a sort of, almost, it's got a bit of a sort of jolly, springy feel to it, but it's definitely saying something, I hope, about what we need to do and not ignoring our planet.
Harvester of gold, he cried, you're counting down the days. Your mothers and brothers have all flown away. Harvester of gold, he cried, brace up, reasonable. For with the first day of spring, you shall sing on.
I think that song is, as you said, it's got that springy, like just a lovely feel to it, but also the fact that it's kind of almost a social commentary song, or a bit of a protest song almost. It's
Yeah.
very clever. It's that subliminal thing that your parents did to you, you're doing to us
Yeah,
now.
I try my best.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And um it's taking an appearance in our folk song, poetry and the environment project, is it not? Have I got that
I think
correct?
maybe it is.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, I think. But I wanted to now talk a little bit about your voice.
Mm.
You mentioned before that you were in music theatre, and I can't get over how strong and powerful your voice is, and how much it gives that feeling of musical theatre and that power
Mm.
that you really need in it. And is that something, like, I find it personally very refreshing, because it's not, you don't hear it anywhere in folk. Is that the reaction you tend to get from people?
It is, I'll be honest. There's when you walk into a folk club and you're one, a woman, one, a young person, and two, much as I hate to admit this, shorter than average. People expect a certain thing from you. They expect you to come out and sound like a sort of a lovely, flowery folk maiden. And certainly I like watching the reaction of people who've never heard me sing or never heard me perform, and they go, oh, okay, that's a bit different. Um, but yeah, I think folk is a wonderful genre, but certainly for women, there is an expectation of what your voice is supposed to sound like, and that archetypal sort of Cara Dillon, Kate Rusby-esque voice,
Yeah.
which is absolutely beautiful. It's wonderful. It doesn't have to be like that, and I think possibly that's the reason that I didn't think folk was a viable option for me, because I certainly don't have that voice. I mean, I could put it on, but it would sound so inauthentic,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't be the way I sound. It's not the way it comes out. Because I spent so long in classical choirs and doing musical theatre, there's an amalgamation of different things, and my voice doesn't sound the way a folk voice is expected to sound. So, yeah, it is particularly. I find it really interesting watching from the stage when you can see the audience and they go, "Oh, okay, I can work with this."
Do you find that their treatment of you before and after differs?
Yes, I think probably it does. Certainly, if I'm going to a folk club that haven't booked me because they've seen me live, um, they've booked me because they've either heard of me or somebody's recommended me, that sort of process. Yeah, I do. I think I get a different reaction after I've performed than when I first walk into the room, which is quite refreshing. It sort of means I've done something good or right or whatever. But it's interesting to see that the sort of dynamic and the perspective shifts once they realize I'm not a sort of blushing damsel. Um, I'm not saying every folk club is like that. They are not in any way. But yeah, definitely, I think even in a very small, minor way, there is a difference between before you've performed and after you've performed. But it's just nice to feel I'm doing something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it's nice when occasionally somebody comes up to you and verbalizes that, which is quite nice.
Definitely. Well, as I said, I find it really refreshing. And don't get me wrong, I love that Cara Dillon, Kate Rusby voice. I love it. But
Yeah.
you don't want to dilute it and make it not special anymore by everyone
Mm,
doing that and everyone putting on this. They're just trying to be that person.
precisely.
It reminds me, my older sister sometimes teaches singing, and she doesn't teach
Mm,
folk, but she gets some children coming in and they are trying to be Ariana Grande
yeah.
and people like that. And she says it's the biggest thing that she has to work through, is like, your voice is great as it is. You don't need to sound like someone else. And so the fact that you've gone out there and you're showing off your natural voice, and it's a success and it's great, I think that is going to be inspiring for future performers to not have to fit that mold, that preconceived
Yeah.
idea of what a female voice should sound like.
I completely agree. Couldn't agree more. Because I think certainly when I was doing sort of open mics and that sort of thing, there is even within the popular world, and probably more so within the popular world, there's an expectation that you're going to sound like everybody else, and
Mm-hmm.
it just makes it boring and monotonous. And
Yeah.
yeah, its uniqueness is the spice of life.
Talking of unique, I want to talk now about your songwriting. And it's not even just that your songs are unique to other performers.
apart from obviously you're thinking maybe Harvester of Gold you've nicked from somewhere, and how terrible
Yeah.
will that be if in 5 years' time you've gone around with it, it turns out
Yeah.
it's not yours all along.
Yeah.
Well, but they're unique to each other as well. Each of the songs that we've heard today so far, we've still got one to go, but each of them has been very unique in itself. The story, the melody, just the way that you've handled it. And so I want to explore this songwriting idea. And first, I want to talk about your first ever song you wrote. This one I thought was an ethical issue, not on your part, but how it came about. Can you tell us the story of this first song?
I certainly can. So I think I wrote my very first song when I was about 11, and then I performed it at school, and I recorded it at school because I was very fortunate to go to a school that had a recording studio. It was a normal school, it just had a recording studio, which was great. And I recorded this song, and one of my teachers, she wasn't a music teacher. She just really thought clearly what I was doing was pretty good. And she entered it into a competition, which thankfully it won. And part of it was a public vote. And obviously, once she'd entered it, she told me about it. And I mean, luckily, it did well because, like we said, I think if it hadn't have gone well, yeah, it would have been an ethical issue.
Been the end of your music career, just there and then, just
Yeah.
done.
Okay, I think I'm done with that now. I think
Yeah.
I'll go and try hockey instead. Yeah, but I think it was really nice from a young age to have that validation, and that genuinely was the very first song I ever wrote. It was about a plane ride from London City Airport to Luxembourg, being very turbulent, and me having a great time. It's a very simple song, but it then sort of compares it to love, which obviously at the tender age of 11, I had obviously felt many times. Yeah, and then sort of continued to write those really naff sort of early teen songs that people write,
Yeah.
but it sort of, and probably until I left for uni, they were pretty naff. But I think it's that then helps you go, well, I've written the rubbish out, so now I can start evolving and getting something good on the page, or getting something good out of the guitar or the piano or the violin or whatever it is. So I definitely wouldn't take back any of those early,
Yeah.
arguably really quite rubbish songs, because it's where you've come from.
100%. And also,
Yeah.
in the future, maybe you can release a Lizzy Hardingham pre-teens album. That would be brilliant. And I want
Oh,
the plane ride song
yeah,
on there. I think that would be
anytime.
great. So what do you we've all of your songs, as I said, they're so different. All of the subjects have been very different. What kind of things do you tend to focus on when you write?
I think when I write from experience and current things that are either happening to me, or I'm being told about, or are in my sort of stratosphere at the
Yeah.
time. So certainly the Bees song, I was going to a couple of the Extinction Rebellion sort of marches at the time, and it was very hot on my mind. And certainly when I wrote my sort of other environmental protest-esque song, Memorial for a Glacier, it sort of came from the same place of just being angry, and the guitar and my voice was the only way I felt able to express that. But then also it's the same with other feelings. So if I'm feeling heartbroken or very happy or any of these other things, my go-to outlet for expressing myself is just writing a song. But also I've found the more I've gone out and gigged, the more people I've met, the more people I've talked to at the merch table, they then start giving you their ideas and their stories and the local tale of the local witch from their village. And you go, oh, okay, that's wonderful. Let me just get a pen and paper. And then that's, you almost sort of don't have to find your own ideas because people will just bring them to you. But
Yeah.
I do, I keep a notebook with me, and I've got tons and tons of notes and voice clips on my phone from where I've heard something on a train, or I've heard something on the bus, or in the shop or something. Just these tiny little snippets of something wonderful that you think, oh, I've got to get that down now because I know I'll use it. And even if it's not, I'll use it when I go home, or I'll use it next week or whatever. I mean, one idea that I was given actually by my mum, possibly in 2015, 16, I didn't find a proper way that I thought I was doing it justice until I think 2019. But because I had that bank of ideas and that sort of notebook of scribblings and scrawlings that I write down after a gig or after I've gone to see someone else perform and I'm feeling inspired and I go, oh, I'm thinking this, this and this,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have then had that resource to look back on. So I think that probably answers the reason for the variety in the sort of song topics, because some of them are introspective and some of them are retrospective and some of them are just somebody else has told me a story and I've gone, yeah, I think that's a pretty good song already.
Yeah. Well, I had a big thought process during what you were just saying. I was like, sounds like you're almost like a journalist, but with music, you tell people stories, but through music. And I was like, hang on, isn't that just a troubadour? Aren't you?
Yeah.
You're not just a troubadour. That's exactly the kind of thing that you do. Yeah, it's brilliant, and the idea that they come years later sometimes. It's like the song will be ready when it's ready, and that's why
Yeah,
forcing
that's definitely the thing. I was doing a gig with a wonderful musician called Hannah Scott a couple of weeks ago, and she said that she had this when she broke up with a long-term partner and they moved out and they were both sort of packing up their things, divvying stuff up, and that feeling of sort of separating and almost pulling apart a life that had been together and making it two separate things again. She felt she needed to write a song about that. And this was probably 6-7 years ago. And then her mum very recently used the phrase, you're untangling your life from each other. And she went, right, I'm really sorry, mum, but that's going in a song. It's taken me 8 years to write this song, but you've just said the chorus. And I think as long as you're keeping things on the back burner, there's always going to be that thing that you, if you're attuned to it, if you're always thinking, oh, there's a song in that, oh, there's a song in that, there's a song in that, then the ideas will just pop out at you.
Definitely. Would you say you're quite prolific, especially with all these back burner songs?
I would say possibly yes, but prolific is not sort of intertwined with all of them being of high quality. Yeah, I do write quite a lot. Not so much during the last 18 months or so. I've really struggled because I write from the outside. I write from outside inspiration and from things that are happening and from my emotions. Obviously, that was all very flat. So I didn't write very much. But I other than the last 18 months, I would say I write quite a lot. Yeah.
If you were to, it's difficult, but if you were to give a rough estimate in a non-global pandemic year, if you can remember those years, because I'm struggling now, could you say how many that you write roughly? I'm just very curious.
It sort of depends how much gigging I'm doing, really, because I think the gigging then produces more songs because it's a bit of a cycle for me.
Yeah.
You feel a bit more productive and it's conducive to just getting those creative outlets going. But I'd probably say I'd usually write, it depends whether we're talking finished songs or sort of articles of music that you write and you go, well, that I'll use the chorus from that somewhere else because the verses are rubbish. But I'd probably say I'd write maybe somewhere between 5 and 7 songs a month.
Whoa!
But
I thought you were going to say a year.
but that's not to say that all of those are usable, but they all then work their way into something else. So it could be that I've written 5 songs, 4 of which are pretty crap, but I'll use one line and it'll actually turn into one song that I then put on an album or perform or whatever. So process wise, I'd probably say I write finished songs wise, maybe between 10 and 15 a year.
I think though the fact that you're writing so many, even if they're not good, it keeps like the brain going and it keeps that relevant on your mind.
Yeah.
Whereas I've maybe had a 2-year break from the last song I wrote, and I can't even imagine getting back into it now, just because it's gone so stale. And I'm like, I'm not a songwriter anymore, and I'm sure
you're always a songwriter.
Yeah, it'll come back, but it's just you lose that confidence when you're not doing it, and I think that's why you keeping on it is really good. Okay, we are running out of time a little bit. There's one more thing that I'm going to explore now, and then we're going to have our last song. So the final thing I want to talk about is your latest release, which is 7.
Yes.
Is that right? Can you tell us about 7?
So I'd recorded this just before the pandemic, late 2019, with the idea that I was going to release it in spring, and then I had a lot of dates lined up. They weren't necessarily a tour, but it was enough dates over a concise enough-ish period that it could be considered a tour. And I was basically, I thought during when the pandemic hit, I thought, well, I've got this sea-based music. I've chose one track for each of the major oceans, and I've had an awful lot of heckles about how many oceans people think there are. Obviously, there are tons and tons of oceans that I didn't choose a song for, that I didn't write a song for, but at some point you do have to commit to a number and go, this is how many oceans I'm going to decide there are, because I couldn't find a song for the Aegean Sea or the Mediterranean Sea or the Black Sea. You could just go absolutely nuts. And when the lockdown happened and we were all sort of inside, of course there were people that were still outside, and one of those groups of people was the RNLI, which are very close to my heart because my grandparents and my mum's family are all from Merseyside and Lancashire, so very seafaring people, and they were boating people anyway, and then they moved down to Cornwall, so from one bit of sea to another bit of sea. So the RNLI is quite big in my heart, and it's always sort of, even though I'm basically as landlocked as you can get in the UK, it's always on my mind. And they were still keeping our shores safe. They were still keeping people alive despite a global pandemic. And unfortunately, they were unable to go out and fundraise and do all the wonderful things that they do to keep the RNLI solvent. And I thought, okay, well, what can I do? What can I do? I don't have any useful skills to give them. What can I do? I can't man a lifeboat. So I just thought, you know what? I'll sing some of my little songs. And I thought, well, I've already got this bank of sea-based music, and the two ideas sort of kaboomed together. And I thought, well, why don't I give half of the money that I have from the sales and from the physical and digital sales of these albums to the RNLI. And I've continued to do that ever since. And we did a sort of I did an online album launch at the time, so that was May last year that I released it, and I gave all of that money to the RNLI because I just think it was such an important thing at the time, and it continues to be. And also, it's such an important, I think, the sea in general and seafaring songs are such a part of the folk tradition. We wouldn't have any American songs without sailors. The Americas wouldn't have any English, Irish, Scottish songs without these ships, and we wouldn't have any of those wonderful shanties that help to sort of keep the rhythm while they're at sea and help keep morale, and all of these wonderful capstan songs. And they just hold such an amazing place in the folk world that I thought, yeah, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And it's been wonderful since we've been allowed to go out and gig again, because the songs that now feel old to me, because I recorded them 2 years ago now, I realise actually an awful lot of people haven't heard them because I haven't been out gigging when I was expecting to. So it's been lovely that they've sort of had quite a long gestation period and quite a long period of infancy, because it's a slow burn getting back to where we were before. So yeah, it was really fun to do, and it was nice to have a variety. I've got some traditional, some shanties, and then some self-penned. So it was a really fun project to do.
Brilliant. And if people wanted to buy this, support the RNLI and support you, where would they find the place to buy it?
So the place to buy it is Bandcamp. It's just Lizzy Hardingham Bandcamp. That's all I am. Hopefully that is all I will ever be. And so you can buy it digitally or you can buy it physically, and it's got this wonderful cover art that's a lino. It's digital lino printing, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but it looks absolutely wonderful. It's got sea ships, it's got whales, it's got all this wonderful intricate detail that was designed by a lovely lady called Holly Joyner. And so if you buy the physical one, you get that. And I've also got some illustrated lyric prints of one of my favourite songs on the record. So lots to be had at Lizzy Hardingham Bandcamp.
Head on over there now. Okay, so sadly, we've finished the interview. We've run out of time, but it's been absolutely amazing. And just before we hear your last song, I want to say thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been wonderful chatting.
So your last song is Fisher Child.
Mm.
What is this song? Can you tell us about it?
So this is sort of another C-based song, and I think that's probably why it spoke to me. It was the first song I ever arranged into my own stylings. I was given quite a lot of material when I was first started going to folk clubs as an adult, and lots of people, friends and people from the folk club, gave me their old books or the Penguin collection of folk songs, all of these wonderful resources. And the first one I chose was this one called As I Walked Out One May Morning. And but they're all called that. So I thought, well, if I want to release this and if I want to perform it, I'm going to have to do my own thing with it, and it's going to have to be slightly different, and it's definitely going to have to be called something else. Otherwise, nobody's ever going to find my music. So I decided to call it Fisher Child because that's sort of the ending of the story. It doesn't necessarily fit the folk canon because there's no shipwreck, there's no death toll, and the woman has a nice time.
Lizzy,
I know
that'll work.
it's not even a folk song, is it? But I just thought it was this wonderful song that tells a story of just two people meeting and going, oh, I quite like you. Oh, I quite like you. But you're a fisherman and I don't really like fishermen. And he goes, well, I'm not a fisherman, so should we just have a baby? And that's the whole song, and it's just wonderful. As I walked out one summer's morn on purpose to meet my bride, 'twas there I saw a pretty maid come rowing down the tide. Good morning to you, young fisherman, she cried, what's brought you here? I said, I am fishing for a lady gay, right down the river clear. So he's boldly walked up to her there and kissed her both cheeks aside, and taken her by her lily white hand and rowed her down the tide. And now she's down on bended knee, crying, pray sir, pardon me for thinking you a fisherman who sails the briny sea. So he's launched his boat up to the shore, crying, man, your pardon is lent, and in each other's arms embraced until they gave consent. So now go you to my father's home, where married we will there be, and you shall have a fisher child to row you on the sea. You shall have a fisher child to row you on the sea. You shall have a fisher child to row you on the sea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for watching. To find out more information about our future Tuesday Folk People sessions, please sign up to our mailing list or keep an eye on our social media and website. Our next session will be a week from today at 8 p.m. See you then.